we're going to look at one of the top players in 8v8. In fact, the top rated player, Omre at OS 86. And we're going to break down what makes Omre's games so good and so different from everyone else. You might think, oh no, he just plays like slightly better than other players. No, not at all. Omre, I dare say, does not even play meta. And I think a lot of people try and emulate without quite understanding what this player does really, really well. And this is going to be a significant game for understanding it. Although it goes on generally longer than most games, like most of Omre's games are actually pretty short. This one's going to go on a little bit longer because some people on his team decide to really go crazy with the eco. But that's a good demonstration anyway of what's going to happen in this game. We see already in the comments here a mention of mines. How many heavy mines this game? It's actually a meta thing now. Put like a couple of heavy mines on a mechs or nearby just to actually get rid of the commander early on. It's a very sneaky trick. Good to see mines getting used in the game. Means you actually do need to shield with these ticks, which Omre is doing right away. Is having a good look out, going everywhere in fact, which is quite interesting. They're all on that path, just taking no chances that a mine layer has gotten through. Not surprising here, we see from Team OS1 Clan Addo coming forward with the ticks, doing a bit of an exploration. Now, one thing I am noticing about these early tick armies is they're always 5 ticks, just regimented. I'm going to call them Omre. I'm sorry if I've got it wrong, mate. But we see here actually 7 ticks from Omre. That just gives a little bit more than the 5 tech meta. So everything's attention to detail, whereas quite often it's just 5 things all at once. Like we see here, there's 5 pawns coming out. So that's the next stage. And these pawns will, of course, overmatch the ticks. But Omre is still keeping a good eye on them. But unfortunately, the grunts or pawns are actually not pressing the advantage here, which I find surprising because they are grossly over-metalled. The rovers dash forward, confusing the grunts maybe, or confusing the pawns, but moving back, done their little exploration. And we see now the pawns are surging forward. And Omre's tripled down, interestingly to me, on the ticks and simply going for more numbers than what his opposing lane is putting down. And that is Seven, the player. And we see also some pawns here from Seven. I don't know if they were donated after. We're going to look at the ticks, though, on the southern side. Pretty much equalize the numbers of pawns quite easily and have the advantage of moving much quicker. But this is starting to really actually wear on random variables base, who has got in vehicles which will be at a disadvantage against the early pawn armies. Now I can see what would have happened also if those pawns had been a lot more aggressive at the start and confident in their ability to overmatch what they're up against. All OS players, generally speaking, like to try and build minimally in what they do and act like they're strong where they're not. And it's good to call their bluff at times. But we see here random variable really starting to suffer now. Unfortunately, the early build, not competitive. Omre only able to do so much with ticks here. Backed by LLTs, Omre's safe from any pushes, but we don't see that likewise by random variable, who I dare say could have done with an LLT back in the main base, or at least a few more troops in the right position. Perhaps a radar even should have been put down. No, we do see a radar. For whatever reason, that pawn rush got through. Commander. Okay, we see Omre now take on a large number of ticks. So this is going to really test Omre, you'd usually think, but the LLTs are forming all these safe little harbors that are completely anti-tick. Omre's taking them seriously though, just in case they do find an in. Yeah, you got to remember these guys actually don't know where everything is, so they're having to make use, and they come up on the hill here, and before they can even react, they're destroyed. That LLT placement defensively has really helped out. This time IMO Balance built that very wisely on the hill. Now we see Omre starting to move up north with the commander, and the first thing he does is put down that sentry turret. As we see Addo now get caught out, putting down a quick aircraft plant. I think he's actually really caught out of place as we see the 2 incisors move in as well. And that group of about 20 ticks, very good at taking down commanders, funnily enough. The D-gun just can't give enough casualties of the ticks, and the ticks damage just adds up a little bit too much at the end. Omre now moving forward very brazenly, because that army is down. There's no reason to push forward and to continue to be aggressive. I think detecting that Addo was reliant on that commander to hold the fort, can see these units up north, the Rocketeers, not necessarily the best at fending off a commander. And so he's going to quickly then put down this light laser turret right here to take out the enemy mechs. This is really far up north, way away from the lane. But see here, we don't see IMO balance really doing much. Omre even requested a few early units like grunts or such, didn't produce them. So I think Omre is working out, shit, I have to take the ownership of this lane. Otherwise, we're not going to get these base LLTs down or even the metal. We're going to provide those over to Addo over here, who is rightly on the back foot though from that aggression. We see those ticks pick up on the beamer and move away, not even a casualty. And that's the difference with Omre taking full advantage of micro on the frontline units, not necessarily trying to optimize everything on the back line. Although we do see Omre at the 7-minute mark getting a gifted T2, which is nice to see the red player getting that responsibly early, and also building these quite fast behind 3 constructed turrets. We see nothing too fabulous here. We see 16 solar panels to make that geothermal in a reasonable time. So really not efficient when you think about how much metal the solar panel costs, but also not really reclaiming them either, just keeping them there. It's just easier. So Omre's not overthinking the economy. It's just very, very basic, and instead is trying to get any free metal that's around. We see that taking the rest of the commander there, not even leaving the corpse. Why would you? We're not going to worry about any Lazarus tricks this early on. Putting down also, it's good to see a beamer at the front taking the rocket bot issue seriously, and we see one beamer behind another. The rocket bots might be able to take down the one beamer, but the second beamer is questionable, and even the third to truly cover things if the Rocketeers go further. We do see here it's random, variable, and Omre only, which is pretty much a 2v2 at the moment, although I would expect over here Mizuki to be entering the fight anytime now. And we see the same with the green player actually. These Eco Front does have Eco Front in the name. I wonder if they'd be best served to at least contribute a little bit to the front line, but that doesn't seem to be the meta for whatever reason. As we see here, the Centurions actually able to pick on the Lashes a little bit. The Lasher army though is really beating up on this base. So we start to see the Dragon's Teeth coming down, which is a good option, but we do need to see some rocket bots behind it, and I don't see that at the moment. The wrong unit arguably being produced. Now up north, we haven't been paying much attention to blue, but we now see the breakthrough happen from Hell's Hound, also a bit of a tournament player by the looks of it. Yes, from South Africa, I believe, from that flag. Moving down with the Rocketeers here while pushing forward with the ultra aggressive pawns. Bankso getting bullied. OS 29, a sufficiently experienced player, but just a little bit on the back foot after getting completely overwhelmed here by, I think, just the sheer number of rocket bots. A very sound strategy for a top tier player to do. Once you've got that advantage in rocket bots, it's very hard to push back on that, unless, like you see here from Omre, got a lot of fast units and beamers. So that's been Omre's strategy, and hasn't even got pushed on by Sivan in the end. We're looking at what Sivan's doing here. We already see, of course, the geothermal down. Already a Rattlesnake in a very interesting position, maybe predicting Omre pushing through here, which, if you look at the allocation of resources, I fully understand Sivan to be thinking that way. So now we see an OP take here by Meowcat Meow, taking over Bankso. So that's not good for Blue. Blue's going to now really struggle against this coherent force. And we've also got Psycor down on the bottom. If Psycor can hold out against this next onslaught, we see plenty of Lashes. Wow, that's a huge commitment of forces. So I think Psycor is going to be just fine as we see this com bomb half sort of take out a few rocket bots. A net loss for Psycor, but doesn't matter. This is going to hold. A very interesting composition of forces here. I'm not sure if I'd done that arrow. We can see here 2 lines facing off against one another, almost like Rome Total War or game like that. But it's beyond all reason, folks. We do see some Mausers here moving through. Must be gifts. We don't usually see artillery from Omre, but still very welcome, I am sure. So we're seeing a feeding strategy from IMO No Balance, which I'd be tempted to do myself as a Centurions attack here from Addo, from Team OS No.1 clan. I think they're both next to each other, aren't they? The original OS1 clan is on the air position by the looks of it. So a very dangerous combo. But what's this? Look at this. We see 25 blitzers and 2 aircraft plants to defend The Centurions should be able to hold some of this. We see the ticks here. I'm not sure which player they are. No, the Sevens. So they are fighting against the Blitzers, but I think the Blitzers going to overmatch a tick at all times. There are quite a few casualties, but it's not nearly enough to stop this base being wiped out. A truly astounding number of Blitzers. This is quite a strategy. The reason Blitzers are good is in this raiding scenario. They have quite a lot of speed. They have about 101 and a reasonable DPS. They don't have health, but that doesn't matter if you can kill them before they can do anything. A Starlight pinging off the bottom of them, I would go down and kill that Starlight, but perhaps seeing the Bulls here, which are going to be a lot more dangerous. And so deciding to push around the side by the looks of it and whether that Starlight fire. The incisors from random variable now moving in on this Starlight. I think that's going to be the end of it. Perhaps the Bull is supporting. I'm not sure here. Is that going to be enough? The Jaguar comes in. No, the Starlight is down. Very expensive, 1200 metal. OS1 clan misses all the Blitzers. There's still 8 of them, except the Shurikens keep on coming. Surely they're moving in. Now the construction turrets are remaining there. That is the main thing that's keeping the air player alive at the moment, being able to get one Shuriken out of another. Yes, the Blitzers are looking to raid and they get all EMP in the end. So substantial damage, but to be honest with you, 25 Blitzers is a fair old expense. As we look at Omre's damage efficiency, it's nothing great. But that was perhaps a distraction as these ticks move up into the T2 advanced geothermal plant. Why I do recommend against a team or a Omre-like character is to build a Cerberus here to safeguard against this sort of early attack, particularly by artillery. So a two-pronged assault, and the army was away dealing with this Blitz army of depth, and now these Jaguars, which were perfect for the Blitz army, but against the Marauder and Tick army, not so much, although they are pawns now. So Omre at the 13 or 14 minute mark is starting to expect a Juno, I believe, and surely has the economy. As we see 100 metal per second, let's just have a quick look. I'm actually going to pause this so we don't miss any action. We see that advanced geothermal, so that's critical for the offensiveness of Omre. To back that up, we do see 26 solar collectors, so that's quite a number to transition into that and getting that early T2 mexes up, although it's not super built or super supported. So we're not seeing an optimum play here. We're just seeing a good enough play from Omre. But what Omre is doing really well, and I do think I see 6 factories here. So yeah, definitely scaling up very early on with these T1 units. Might have had some vehicle units at the start to just quickly build those blitzes, but then has gone back to the more affordable bots. That blitz attack would have been very expensive from Omre. Unfortunately, managed to take this down as we see the pawns here attempting to do some more damage, never ceasing offensive against the Starlight. Definitely these 4 Starlights, not the best counter to pawns, and pawns really being the ultimate tool against this army composition. Although we are seeing quite a number of Jaguars, I think Mizuki's done quite well to get to this force composition at the 14-minute mark. It's the Southern team's only hope, as defending against Omre has to be their concern number one. Not the only dangerous player, of course, but if Omre can break through, then it's all over here. The Crater is desperately holding on. Seven is actually a remarkably good player. I think has an underinflated, if that is such a thing, OS, and is just happily sitting there and now defending in depth, which I would expect from a really good player. We're not really seeing anything on the mini-map of other fronts changing like the red front is, so we're going to really look at this as these pawns. Yep, there goes down another Starlight. This one barely hanging on 0%. There we go. So that's from 5 to 3 Starlights now, starting to take a lot of attrition on this force. Despite it being T2, we see this never ceasing force. Interestingly, a big lot of Lazarus coming up from Omre would have had to, you think, interrupt the pawn production. So the pawn production in the end was just a little bit mediocre and couldn't have broken through that force. But Omre's just happy to apply that pressure like a sink running into the bath, and's gone, the bath is half full. I'm happy with that. It's time for me to, back off. So the Lazarus moving in now on this rattlesnake wreckage while moving down on this southern base at the same time, not wasting a unit, trying to fight this bull-heavy army. Is just trying to see what can be done by being offensive here. Perhaps distracting the army while the rattlesnake is after. As Sivan, the commander, this is a 3v1 scenario here. Walks up on that rattlesnake, won't degun in order to retain the medal perhaps, but I think that's perhaps a mistake, as possibly Omre will simply resurrect that. But the team now is very aware of that issue. But the pawns are getting really close. Just Mizuki here feels like can't retreat and let the pawns basically overrun the southern base here. As these Lazarus 36, you'd think 34 now, you wouldn't think would be too many. Greedily take on the Quaker takes out, and the Jaguars take out half the Lazarus numbers. A questionable amount of Lazarus. I think surely 10 could have been enough for whatever Omre wanted to do. So we're not seeing pitch a perfect play. We're seeing just good enough play here from all these factories. Got a fairly large lot of construction turrets here, which I do find interesting. It's mainly focused here on the aircraft plant, providing some cover against the dangerous Shuriken. Sense would probably be better. Von Comet, the Spectator, says, I'd have to agree. The Jaguars are really good at fast hit and runs, then going back to base and getting repaired. They're not really good for protracted fights. They don't have the heft. In fact, welders are 10 times better. The last Quaker, I think, goes down there. So definitely not Omre's preference to have the Quakers, as we see all the pawns start to build up their numbers, get up to that critical mass. We see about 84 here, starting to get up there. A hopeful Juno hitting the pawns. I just noticed something, and I thought I would pause again, actually, was the energy per second situation here. We've got 59% extra, so the red team's definitely managing to scale up a lot faster than the blue team. I find it very interesting seeing a 59% advantage. We don't actually see a breakthrough, it's simply an outscaling advantage. The medal a second doesn't really tell the full story because the Lazarus and the like been at work, but we are starting to see a 25% increase on the medal a second on average. And we're not really seeing too much of a difference in their army value. I think maybe a difference in the tech, as we see the blue team going for an early T3 play here. But yeah, Omre's going to respond to that with T1 by the looks of it. So Omre's not worried whatsoever. Do we see anything more than that? No, some beamers, maybe a vehicle plant coming up for something a little bit heavier. So definitely not seeing any sort of panic from Omre, who, because he's been so aggressive, I guess the other team is on the back foot and worried rather than thinking about any massive plays themselves. So that's one thing that pressure does. So combined, even with the eco up, I'm not sure if this is representative of all time. Let's actually run this for a little bit. We're going to see what IMO no balance has on average. Yeah, it has 120 or so on average. About equaling Omre, who has many more T2 mexes at the moment. I'm sure it's going to go in the way of IMO no balance. But we do see here a fair metal disadvantage with the crater player, which is quite common to see that. So these players are not going to have the same sort of tempo. If we go over and look at Ado here, as opposed to random variable, we're going to see, yeah, a fair difference in the weight of metal. So this team here, from all that aggression, is just not able to scale like the top team has, I should say. They have been able to get to early T3, but because the pressure hasn't even been enough, we see a scaling over here to counter that. I believe we're going to see that. Very interested to see how these T3 units go. So they're moving down south, which I sort of agreed with. Lordot's seen the weakness in the team and is making up for that metal disadvantage by attacking random variable here. As Omre sweeps forward with about 173 pawns approximately, and now dropping massively as they take on this mobile army of bulls here. Comforted to see about 10 bulls, which seems an appropriate amount, backed by 4 starlights to take on a heap of pawns. But still they managed to take a few casualties, surprisingly. And we see about 50 pawns left. Not enough, but I think they're actually going to nab a starlight here or two. Will this starlight get down? Perhaps it'll be safe, actually. No, it runs away. It's absolutely fine. So Omre is showing how good he is with the push here. Able to take down half that dangerous army, even some Jaguars as well. But again, that was all expended. So we'll have to rebuild the army, will Mizuki. Doing their own counter pawn push into the center here. Quite an interesting ploy. Again, I think just a massive Centurions would have done quite well against what Omre is doing here. So we've just seen a mismatch. And also this advanced vehicle plan is just horrible against mass pawns. Would move this over into mass welders, this sort of army they're up against. I think Sivan would be having a much better time. Although we are seeing a lot of gifted units here that Omre's getting. Now here with banishes randomly. Pink with a massive, it looks like some sort of drop is happening. What are these? They're actual commanders. This is actual comm bombs. I'm not sure if they're decoy commanders. Can you tell? They look like the real thing. From Nazar here, somehow gathering 2 commanders to be used in a comm drop. A very interesting play. As the air wins the battle here, will these go well? I'm sure this is a tried and true strategy. I've never actually seen this of abductors just moving in here. Oh yeah, the commander's going to take down this base quite well. We see the advanced jet try and blow up the commander a little bit late there. Gets taken out in the sky. So that green base, oof. Actually, the advanced energy converters hung on. Look at how little health they got. But this commander here took down a vast number of this base. That's pretty good. I'd say that replaces an atomic bomber, generally speaking. I think just 2 atomic bombers would have been fine, though, and would have saved the commanders, but it was done in style. As we see here, the southern base barely holding off. Mizuki is just stuck here with a constant pressure, moving around in a random series of fashions. The more Mausers here, or Quakers here, sorry, on the top of the hill, just able to ping off. And we see Omre here with an offensive commander starting to lack in energy a little bit, so just staying still. Behind the Fort Obscura, going to come down perhaps, but it was seen, unfortunately, with the break in energy there, which was quite a problem. Please, Omre says. So that little sneak didn't go too well. Oh, this might be a disaster. Gets down to 2% health, 80 hit points. Almost a disaster for Omre. Manages to pull back. The jammer being very useful in that situation. So this base has been quite a problem for Omre. It is the 22-minute mark, and still it survives somehow against this onslaught. Mizuki having a really good force mix to face against this. As we now see the atomic bombers move through, feel they have the advantage, which they do. But this team would have surely built a heap of AA. The air advantage goes to the red team, who does nuke a quite important, not a huge amount of eco, but I think this will be the death knell. As we see the APHIS goes in the enemy air, it's all over for OS1 clan, basically. So the red team now has a clear advantage. As we see the blitzers work through. So it's not just Omre pulling the weight here, although 60 blitzers, so we know what that vehicle factory is for, was of course for blitzers, not anything heavier than that. It was going to respond to T3 on the map with not more T3 or heavy tanks or anything of the kind, just more blitzers. Solves everything. As the player Ado starts to get pulled apart here, that base is completely down. Air is completely down. I don't even think Omre is aware just how blown up this base is at the moment. Omre usually all over things, perhaps does see that finally on the map and thinks, oh no, I'm going to take down this geothermal. A fair trade for only a few blitzers. Although that was 75 blitzers, it did manage to take down most of the player here, who has basically no production and only spending 4 metal per second. So Crater is on their knees, and we've got Addo on their knees, and Omre here pulling back, perhaps senses that the blue is coming down to help out Hell's Hound from all the way up north. That's how concerned they are of the South's position, with no sort of pawn army of themselves. Mizuki not able to get up the numbers against this horde. We do see, interestingly, a number of brutes to get a bit of heft to the numbers, although Omre still is not producing any T2, I'm sure of it. As we look back, yes, they're not, just some aircraft, basically. Keeping up this avalanche of numbers, overwhelming the team. Although their eco isn't huge, they're able to fend this off. We can see here just how pathetic the scaling is at the moment. It's the 24-minute mark with not even 17%, I think, on that first APHIS, on the APHIS line from Mizuki, who's just keeping up the numbers. We see a steady 10 like it's queued up here, but the Jaguars are getting pulled down. I would have just loved to see some welders into the equation here and some Centurions. I think this could have been held off a lot more economically, as we see the atomic bomber now move in on the south from Nazar, affecting no doubt the breakthrough. That's the hope here. 3 bombers attacking the main base, perhaps too much. Perhaps 2 would have been enough considering this flak, but I guess the job will get done as we see that hopeful APHIS line, starting APHIS line, seed, it is all down. And now let's look at these absolutely gutted players. Funnily enough, they're all functional. They've got about 70 metal a second, Sivan and Mizuki alike, but I think Ado is really struggling at 35. Meanwhile, Emre is not backing off at all for a moment, so these players cannot catch breath from this immense player. And we can see now on the energy per second that lead has gone up to 113%, an astounding amount, as I think it's mainly IMO no balance just being able to eco up in the background. Let's have a look here quickly at the eco situation. No, funnily enough, it's not at all. We see IMO no balance actually a little bit lame duck on the energy produced, but IMO no balance is only a 5-chef player. We see actually Nazar and Meow Cap Meow with the runaway ecos here on the energy produce or on the aphasing. Very interesting. So let's have a look. Oh yes, we do see these pretty respectable aphis farms up by the 30, or no, not even that, the 25-minute mark. We see IMO no balance now just starting to catch fire. That has been donating a number of units to Omre here to help out with the pressure, and no doubt it's better off for one player to control all units, I must say. In generally, you don't see it though, because people should control their own units. But in a case like me, if I was playing with Omre, I'd be doing exactly the same thing here. When you've got someone who's 3 times your OS, perhaps time to gift over the units just for the team's sake on that one lane. And not all units, but definitely the next lane over. That's going to be very handy. As we see the Shivers here up on the hill, taking full advantage. Now, the Shiver is, if you didn't know, a fat boy on steroids. Basically, it has a fat boy in stats, twice as fast, and it's got a missile besides. So it's definitely an OP unit. At times, people think the Shiver is bad for some reason, and it's perhaps bad in these situations where you don't micro it perfectly and the bulls get a little bit close. I think the Shivers are better at extreme range, but still they take a fairly large accounting of the bulls. We can see pretty much they're all dead now, whereas the Shivers still do have some numbers here. So they've traded quite favorably as far as metal costs goes. Bulls are not cheap either. They're about 1,000 metal a piece, whereas Shivers are about 1,500. And 2 Shivers is all you need, especially against a naked advanced geothermal there, which will go down. The Shiver is still up and about. And we do see the Pulsar perhaps fending off the remaining amount of Shivers here. But I think there's an attack that actually got through. And this is the great thing about building these stouts at this stage. And what pawns wouldn't have done is just to be able to effect a run by and not get blown up by one beamer or bull. So the tanks there done a little bit more damage and affected the breakthrough. I don't think we're seeing any more tanks though. Omre has reverted back to the pawns to support the continuous gift, by the looks of it, of Shivers as the atomic bombers move in from the blue team. So we see some instant air support. Actually, that's very fast, better than what I'd usually expect. But the reason why it is so fast, of course, is because the teams know that the game is won on the edges and the whole team is riding on Omre getting through here. Even though Omre's not really affecting it completely, the pressure is just immense and unrelenting. I don't think I've seen a moment for some time when Omre isn't attacking these players, which they can't get their breath and regroup. As we see up north, a Razor is starting to move through, so perhaps the blue team will actually take the top edge and be able to take down Meow Cat Meow's impressive Aphis line, perhaps over-investing on Aphis as we see that Razor left to get way too close. The Beamers on the hill, supported by the Shivers. I think Omre is actually fended off, but they had to come all the way from the northern side, and I'm wishing Blue had Lordot up here trying to break through the crater. As that Razor goes down, we see some last-minute abductors and snipers able to fend off any sort of T3. I'm actually quite interested in what Meow Cat Meow's doing here. It just mainly looks like T2 while producing the Aphis line. Not the worst call. T2 are very economical when there's enough of them, and it pays in a defensive war to build them rather than T3. So we see here now an 83 OS eco. Absolutely OP. And that's it. Omre's keeping it very simple. Getting gifted units doesn't hurt, of course, but you can see just how effective the T1 pressure has been. You don't need anything else if you use the units well and micro them well. I think that's key, and don't just send them to die into static defenses. Actually handle the static defenses with one unit or another, enough to crack the static defenses, then T1 behind the static defenses is all you need. Don't overcomplicate it. But the Karganeth here, from Lordot on a tear, perhaps the last chance. The Karganeth, of course, very good against pawns. They've got very fast tracking missiles, but coming in from the flank here, it's an awkward area and forcing actually a retreat, which is bizarre. But I guess you're not going to break through the opposing Cargonists anyway. These demons are going to be a big threat from Onray. The hopeful pawns moving down here from Blue and Lazarus just to be absolutely barbecued by the demons moving forward. At least getting an early alarm on the demons there. Mizuki sending down pawns to die, thinks better of it and runs away. There's no point trying to attack the demons, of course. Apparently this is the last comm, by the way, helping down at Omray's base. After that comm drop, it's what I'd expect. The Shivers moving down desperately, the fast fat boys, to try and combat the demons. The only thing that's going to stop this. The demons, I would have pushed through, but I guess saw that maybe on the... Oh, there we go. The atomic bombers did take down those demons in the end. So now they're on the board. It's going to be a lot harder for Omray to break through. The 30-minute mark, they should have come online before then, the defensive atomic bombers. But there you go. Air has had the run of the mill and, of course, took out Blue Team's air early on, so we didn't see any sort of advanced defense happen. As the Shivers from the Northern team have to hold off Omray from the crater. But I think that is a deadlock, basically, and we see what's happening in this deadlock now as we go up to 114% advantage on the eco, going up to 120%, then back to 108%. Blue's actually scaling up a little bit, which I wouldn't do in this situation. As we see here, the army value is 88% in favor of the red team, who's just got so much resources, much more than the blue team here. And although blue is able to fight them, and we see here light blue here taking on all these pawns, it's good to see the razors against the mass grunts, I should say. So it's good to see some actual counter units come up here. The Cargonists, although they're a decent unit for sure, they're not quite as good as the razors at handling the grunts, or so I believe. But I just have a feeling now, are we going to see any more eco? We are seeing about 622 metal a second. I know that's IMO, no balance, producing a heap of spam there. But yeah, Omray's not got an eco whatsoever, has just relied on that first half an hour of aggression, and is continuing the aggression as we see the pawns just stream into the Shivers. If it wasn't for the rest of the team, Omray would be in a lot of trouble at the moment. We see the tank reserve here waiting and patiently building numbers. So Omray is just not even worried. Perhaps we actually might get a breakthrough here. Could this actually happen? Omray's starting to say, bro, you should only get to go T3. The recriminations start, but unfortunately the attack is not combined. We don't see any sort of combined arms. The defensive wasps moving in, 21 of them. Also defensive roughnecks, about 35, but they don't have to be used. The demons surging forward here. So I think the blue team didn't realize the advantage they had on the field, and you couldn't blame them looking at any sort of scouting or radar. Seeing that amount of stouts coming at you, you would think you don't have the numbers on the board. And I think Omray uses that psychological warfare to his advantage by overwhelming with T1 units. Finally, the team, and you would think, is glomming onto Omray's way of business, but surely this team here should be able to conjure... Yeah, we do see perhaps the player he was talking to there, Omray, starting to build now juggernauts. Will it be too late, though? I don't believe so. I do have to wonder, why go back and forth? Simply commit to an attack to at least get something. A back and forth micro play. Very interesting for conserving the force. A catapult, though, starting to take advantage of it. They're going to have to move up, perhaps, and neutralize this catapult. I would perhaps eat those shots and move through here just to take out the dangerous player that is Omray. We did not see that. We saw this back and forth along the front line. Now the stouts starting to move in, and again the T3 perhaps starting to move up. The stouts, though, just looking like the target practice, to be honest with you. They're just outranged and looking very feeble indeed. I think the T1 is definitely outclassed. Perhaps Omray was talking to himself about, bro, you should only build T3. It's like a challenge that Omray's doing, just building T1. Of course, getting gifted some units, but it's not nearly enough to hold off this massive force. We look up north. I'm quite respecting what the blue team is doing. It's 35 minutes, and they've had a pretty big economic disadvantage. We start to see the economy come back a little bit, but still an 80% disadvantage over probably a good 20 minutes. It would be something like that, at least 15%. So the red team here probably not built enough units. I think going straight for the Juggernauts was a mistake. I think an early build by IMO No Balance of just getting enough shivers. I think if IMO No Balance had just built grunts like Omre, we would have seen these players dead by now, surely. As Pink moves in now, we see a massive number of abductors carrying something. It looks like mammoths by the looks of it. Up north, we do see a bombing run as well. Trying to cover this both for you here. The abductors moving in, shocking the AA, putting down the mammoths, who also have some ability to AA. That's very interesting. As the unsuccessful attack here progresses, we see an APHIS or such go down, at least a reactor. Oh, wow. The bombers managed to take down at least the energy converters and a good deal of the converter farm here, as we also see the mammoths move in now towards the old air player, now the new air player, JTL, here with the hopeful APHIS line. The Razors moving down to take down these mammoths, but those Razors are not on the front line, and we do see Ice on Skates takes full advantage of that lack of races. A very good push forward. We also see here Green moving back up defensively, and that's perhaps all that's needed, especially at this critical time for Omre to move through here, at least with the pawns. Interestingly, all these Wasps are getting used offensively, just flinging everything at the blue team, and the blue team is able to hold up here with the combined Juggernaut, which is half dead, Razors and Titans. I don't know if Meowcat Meow really has an answer against this, actually. We do see a little bit of trouble up the northern front. Let me know in the comments, really, if you do see how Red is still in the game with their mistakes. Obviously, you'd want to blame the T1 challenge here. Oh, we do actually see a T2. Finally, at the 37-minute mark, we see a T2. Nothing really built out of it, apart from maybe a T2 con. But yeah, perhaps going a little bit too hard on the T1 was Omre. Still building forces here, though. We see Stouts and Pawns getting collected. The south is utterly at a standstill. The north, the blue team, has actually got the advantage. The Juggernaut takes down some energy, but it doesn't really affect anything, I think. No chain reactions on the main APHIS lines. Here, we see a bulwark behind T2. It's going to be tough to dislodge that. And also the snipers. They're starting to move up the cliff face. I don't think that these Karganeth and Shiva is going to get too far forward, relying on that one Titan, and I don't think it's going to be enough. The Titan is manoeuvring around the T2 walls, though. How are we going down south here? The Juggernaut has moved up, and I don't think there's really any fighting against the Juggernaut. This team is exhausted by just the utter aggression Omre has shown. We can all pick on Omre and say, well, you would have won the game by now. But remember, Omre has been fighting 3 players here. Moore has been fighting the whole team, while this side has just echoed up to a bizarre fashion. I think if they were aggressive, we would have seen a much earlier close of the game. We see the Resign go up here. They must know us all over the blue team, despite echoing up well in the end and getting some equilibrium of sorts on the APHIS number. APHIS is, at this stage, scaling does not win the game. Juggernauts do. Holy shit. Not expecting the Juggernauts to walk in, but that's what I'm No Balance has been doing while Omre was keeping him safe, was advancing up. And it's ridiculously easy to eco up to Juggernauts and Titans if you're not really hassled throughout the game, particularly by the 35-minute mark. There we go. The blue team has packed it in. Let's quickly look at the awards. Omre, efficient use of resources, 1.51. Despite how Omre looked on the damage efficiency here, only sort of 50%. That is actually very effective with all the base damage and expensive unit Omre did manage to get rid of anyway. Got that efficient use of resources, but of course they've got the gifted units, and we see also got destroying enemy units and defenses on only 100 metal a second and a few gifted units, guys. Most of that was done by Omre's own units that he built, and almost got a bull. But Nazar done very well on his own team of destroying the enemy resource production, and that's the longest map you're going to see with Omre, and it wins every game. Now you can see why Omre has OS 83, I hope. Also took the most damage. Thank you for watching my gameplay breakdown and supporting the channel. See you in the next video.